Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of 2005's Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the fourth entry in our weekly Harry Potter Rewatch series here at New Rockstars. Now that the books were getting longer, the adaptation choices were getting more interesting.
Harry, you put your name in the Goblet of Fire.
We are revisiting all 8 films of this series for Easter eggs, details you never spotted, and connections to the book, and just some interesting behind-the-scenes facts that make this series so timeless. And I promise you, by the end of this breakdown, you will have a whole different perspective on Michael Gambon's crazy rage moment. Goblet of Fire opens with another stylized Warner Brothers logo. As we pointed out last week, these titles just get darker and darker with each film, and this film, with the death of Cedric Diggory, is the darkest yet. Reflected in the metallic surface of this studio logo is the scaly skin of Nagini, Voldemort's snake companion, and we will later learn a vessel containing 1/7 or really 1/8 of his soul has a Horcrux. 2018's Fantastic Beasts and the Crimes of Grindelwald establishes Nagini's backstory in the 1920s as a maledictus, a female born with a blood curse causing her to turn into a snake and a circus performer. In my opinion, a quite unnecessary backstory that we shall, going forward, ignore. This is the first Harry Potter film that John Williams did not do the music for. Composer Patrick Doyle took his place. Doyle was Gilderoy Lockhart actor Kenneth Branagh's longtime composer for nearly all of his films. We open in Little Hangleton Graveyard, where this film's climactic moment will revisit. Nagini slithers out from a skull, forming the symbol of the Dark Mark, the icon of the Death Eaters. This is the first film that doesn't open with Harry at the Dursleys, which always made for lighter comedic fare. Opening in a grim cemetery is tonally a spooky or supernatural note, like Shakespeare opening Macbeth with witches. This film departs that horror vibe for most of the runtime after this, creating a bit of an unavoidable whiplash that we will talk about as we go. But the opening shots do make a promise that no spare will be spared, and this is the first film of the series to be rated PG-13 by the MPAA. Voldemort calls Nagini to him in Parseltongue. Nagini moves by the tombstone with the statue of death looming over it. This will be the statue that will ensnare Harry later, and on the headstone are several names. Thomas Riddle, 1880 to 1943, that is Voldemort's grandfather. His grandmother, Mary Riddle, from 1883 to 1943, and his father, Tom Riddle, 1905 to 1943. Yes, they all died at the same time, and we'll explain why. And from the face of death, the camera pans up to reveal the title of the film. Now, J.K. Rowling initially considered titles like Harry Potter and the Doomspell Tournament and Harry Potter and the Triwizard Tournament, and chose Goblet of Fire because it had a Cup of Destiny kind of feel to it. Perversely, the Goblet of Fire applies not just to the cup that would produce Harry's name, but also the fiery cauldron that would restore Voldemort's adult form in this graveyard by the film's end. A light turns on in a little house down the hill from a much bigger house. Now, the book gives a lot more context. The big house belonged to the Riddle family. 50 years earlier, a maid entered the house to find all 3 Riddles, Voldemort's grandparents and his father, Tom Sr., dead. Young Tom's witch mother named him after his muggle father. The bodies had no marks on them, and they all seemed perfectly healthy other than the fact that they were dead. Police arrested Frank Bryce, the gardener, but since they couldn't prove that there even was a murder, they had to release him. But for years, everyone in town assumed he had done it. He kept up the grounds ever since, never talking to anyone, and that's who we see now, trying to make himself a late-night cup of tea. He listens to the radio.
Further north, humid and warm. Bright spells, but increasing cloud will bring showers.
This is actually the voice of director Mike Newell. After Prisoner of Azkaban, Alfonso Cuarón was once again offered the opportunity to direct, but he turned it down because he felt like it would be too much of a time crunch since he was also overseeing post-production on the 3rd film. Mike Newell had directed films like Donnie Brasco and 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and actually was the first English director of this series. Frank investigates the light in the Riddle house, and we hear Voldemort speak.
How fastidious you've become, Wormtail. As I recall, you once called the nearest gutter to home.
Voldemort is mocking Wormtail's time living in rat form. Voldemort is played by Ralph Fiennes, and yes, he does use the Welsh pronunciation. It's not Ralph, it's Rafe. Fiennes had played villains in movies like Schindler's List and Red Dragon. Producer David Heyman said that Fiennes was their first and only choice for Voldemort, saying, quote, "He has the ability to inspire such fear with so little." After Peter Pettigrew's escape at the end of the last film, he is now nursing Voldemort back to health. When we last saw Voldemort, aside from his memory in the diary in Chamber of Secrets, Voldemort was really just a fart cloud that flew through Harry. So how is he now in this baby form? Well, it's really connected to a character in the book named Bertha Jorkins. Bertha Jorkins was left out of this film. She worked at the Ministry and went missing after going on vacation to Albania. We find out Voldemort actually killed her after torturing her to get information about the Triwizard Tournament and the fact that Moody would be teaching at Hogwarts. Chapter 33 of Goblet of Fire kind of just glosses over Voldemort disposing Bertha's body after it was, quote, damaged beyond repair, followed by Wormtail following Voldemort's instructions using a spell or two of his own invention. Now, there is a very morbid theory within the Harry Potter fandom centered around Bertha Jorkins. Apparently, the author did mention a detail in an early draft of Goblet of Fire related to the process of Voldemort coming back into corporeal form that she said made her editor sick to her stomach. And the theory goes that Bertha Jorkins might have been pregnant and that Voldemort stole the fetus and possessed the fetus. Yikes, I know. While this Bertha Jorkins theory is far too horrifying for a kid's book, it is the kind of dark magic associated with the ritual Wormtail later uses to draw the blood from Harry and the bone from Tom Riddle Sr. It is the kind of thing that a writer trying to come up with ideas might have put in an earlier draft. Now, in the Riddle house, there is another man there who is revealed later to be Barty Crouch Jr., played by David Tennant. He is not in this scene in the book, though, and putting him here in the movie scene changes really the mystery structure from book to film, so that in the film, we know Barty Crouch Jr. is involved as soon as we know what Barty Crouch Jr. looks like from the Pensieve flashback. And the twist is really just the fact that who we thought was Mad-Eye Moody was this Death Eater using Polyjuice Potion, making it a bit of a Scooby-Doo type twist. Screenwriter Steve Kloves probably did this just to simplify the mystery, which also unfortunately involved removing the Bertha Jorkins of it all, as well as the whole Crouch family backstory. But translating this twist from page to screen might have just been impossible for a movie. We'll discuss more of this later. Nagini comes in and snitches on poor old Frank to Voldemort in Parseltongue, and Frank is immediately Avada Kedavras. There's a cool transition from the green of the Avada Kedavra killing curse, rushing in at Frank and hearing his screams, to the tea kettle he put on earlier, steaming and whistling. We are reminded of the steam engine train whistle of the Hogwarts Express, mixing in with Lily Potter's scream and Prisoner of Azkaban. So Harry awakens, having seen all of this as a nightmare. And yes, he's already at the Burrow. Reportedly, Richard Griffiths and Fiona Shaw asked for a pay bump, which probably just made it easier for the filmmakers to omit them, because the Goblet of Fire book just has really 2 chapters at Privet Drive, and they really just establish Harry's correspondence with Sirius Black and the Weasleys inviting Harry to the Quidditch World Cup. But as a result, this opening act of Goblet of Fire, the film, is a sprint. We do not have much time to understand what the Quidditch World Cup even is before Harry gets there, and we don't have a moment to really just transition from Harry sensing Voldemort's return, contextualizing it with his past years at Hogwarts, to now going on this side trip. But I also think it might just be like an American versus UK and really the rest of the world type of issue when it comes to the World Cup. Like in July, every 4 years, Europe, and especially UK, where football was invented, is swept up in football frenzy. And I'm sure Mike Newell probably just felt that between that cultural tradition in the UK and all the book readers in America who knew the story anyway, they just didn't really need that much context. Thematically, the Quidditch World Cup also just kind of excites these students for their own international contest at the school, and they needed a way to introduce Cedric Diggory and set up what the Portkey was and introduce the Death Eaters. We see how Ron's room is adorned with a bunch of Chudley Cannons merch. That's his favorite Quidditch team that has red and orange colors. He clutches a Cannon's blanket to his chest when Hermione wakes him up. He's got their poster on his wall near his bed, and there are stickers and pennants up all over. We meet Amos Diggory and his son, Cedric Diggory. Robert Pattinson, actually his first major film role. Arthur Weasley and Amos Diggory are dressed oddly because the Ministry of Magic requires all witches and wizards going to the cup to dress like muggles so as to not attract attention. But most people in the wizarding world have no clue how muggles dress. Mike Newell builds on Alfonso Cuarón's choice to have Harry and the boys have shaggy, messy hair, as Harry's hair is described in the books. But now it's like Newell saw the mop in Prisoner of Azkaban and was like, more! To the point of Harry now looking like a woodland creature has climbed atop his head. They approach a seemingly simple boot on the hill, a portkey. Portkeys are unassuming objects that muggles wouldn't think to touch, that magical folks touch at a specific time to be transported to another location. In the book, Harry describes the feeling of it like a hook behind his navel being suddenly jerked forward. The portkey introduction here sets up the Triwizard Cup, turning out to be a portkey later in the film, of course. They land on part of the English coastline that suggested to be near the White Cliffs of Dover. Arthur, Amos, and Cedric land gracefully, and Cedric helps Harry to his feet, setting up their relationship of helping each other out throughout the film. The Quidditch World Cup is a bonanza. A lot of the tents have chimneys on them, having been bewitched to be larger on the inside with the comforts of home. The 2 teams playing in this cup are Ireland and Bulgaria, so there are a ton of Irish and Bulgarian flags all over the place. There is a quick cameo of 2 house elves riding llamas. Presumably these would be Dobby and Winky, though it's not confirmed. Dobby and Winky play a very important role in the Goblet of Fire book, but they were cut out for the film. Again, we'll get to that later. Behind Arthur's tent, you can actually see another campsite with an American flag. The Fantastic Beasts spin-off films explore the American wizard community with their school, Ilvermorny. The inside of this tent is expanded, the same extension charm that Hermione will later use for their tent when they're glamping in Deathly Hallows, and the same charm used on the trunk where Barty Crouch Jr. as fake Moody will do to keep captive the real Moody. And onto the Quidditch World Cup pitch. They pass the Malfoys, who have better seats in the minister's box.
Do enjoy yourself, won't you?
while you can.
Remember that Lucius's cane with the snake head has fangs that would draw blood whenever he clamps it down on anybody. Lucius is so smug, he's not even trying to hide the fact that he is about to join a Death Eater clan march. Ron has a pair of omnioculars in his hand. They are like magical opera glasses or binoculars that can slow down, speed up, or replay whatever you're watching. Hermione and most of the Weasleys are rooting for Ireland, although Ron and Harry also wear Bulgarian merch because they're fans of the Bulgarian seeker, Victor Krum. And Victor's Quidditch number is 7, which is also Harry's number on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. In the book, Ireland's mascot is the leprechaun, and they have a bunch of leprechauns flying over the crowd, throwing out gold, but it turns out to be fool's gold, as Ron is later super embarrassed when all the gold he thought he had collected has vanished. His poverty is a really big deal in this story in particular. The Bulgarian mascots are Vila, who are basically creatures that look like extremely attractive women who can sort of hypnotize men. But most of the book chapter is omitted here, though the match basically goes down like this. Krum catches the snitch, but Ireland still wins because they were up by 160 points, and the snitch is only worth 150 points. Krum just caught it because he knew Bulgaria would never catch up, and he wanted to end it on his own terms. After the match, a group of Death Eaters wreak havoc, setting tents ablaze. Death Eaters are, of course, Voldemort's most loyal followers, practitioners of the dark arts, and radical pure blood fanatics. This moment in the book is even more messed up, as the Death Eaters catch and torture 4 muggles, including 2 children, suspending them high in the air for everyone to see, and using the Imperius Curse on them to control their movements. And yes, there is an obvious similarity between their pointed hoods in this movie and the hoods worn by the clan, though this design will be changed in subsequent films, they say, because they were hard to fit into tight shots. Okay. The Death Eaters here scorch the entire camp, and Harry sees Barty Crouch Sr. activate the Morsmord spell to fire the dark mark into the air. This is what Voldemort's Death Eaters would use to mark the houses of those they had killed. Here, the mark actually causes the Death Eaters to scatter, though, probably because these Death Eaters would be the ones who managed to stay out of Azkaban, so that would make them very worried that a real-life Death Eater is going to judge them for not being sufficiently loyal to the Dark Lord. A bunch of Ministry officials show up, including Barty Crouch Sr.
Which have you captured it? Crouch, you can't. You did not lie! You've been discovered at the scene of the crime!
So after Voldemort's fall, Barty Crouch Sr. gained some fame by being super harsh on anyone who was even somewhat suspected of being a Death Eater. His son, Barty Crouch Jr., was accused of being a Death Eater, and Barty Crouch Sr. had him sent to Azkaban, and after that, the public kind of soured on him. There, of course, is more to this backstory. But onto the Hogwarts Express. Hermione reads the Daily Prophet article written by Rita Skeeter, who shows up in person later, with the headline, "Terror at the Quidditch World Cup." The article blames the Ministry for the chaos for not having better security. Ron is wearing one of his mom's hand-knitted sweaters with the R on it, and he reads Flying with the Cannons, a book about the Chudley Cannons. They set up a bit of Ron's conflict with Harry here when the trolley witch comes by.
Packet of Droobles and a licorice wand. On second thought, just the Droobles. That's what I'll get it for. Just the Droobles.
Again, Ron's family is extremely poor, and he has a ton of siblings, whereas Harry is an only child, and his parents left him with a whole bunch of money. And I didn't mention this in past breakdowns, but really it's because people in his ancestry had invented all kinds of interesting consumer products like Skelligro, the stuff that he has to drink in Chamber of Secrets. But between Ron and Harry, each one thinks they have the better deal, but the grass is always greener on the other side of the Whomping Willow. And we meet Cho Chang, a member of the Ravenclaw Quidditch team, and Harry's crush. Cho is played by Katie Leung, a Scottish actress born to parents from Hong Kong.
Anything sweet for you, dear?
Yeah, this film goes through the typical coming-of-age tropes of revisiting the same simple routines of childhood, but now everything during puberty has a very different meaning. The Hogwarts geographical surroundings and the Scottish countryside have been updated so that the Black Lake looks like it extends beyond the hills, so that it's less abrupt when the Durmstrang ship rises. Now, the lake is a freshwater landlocked lake, so the ship didn't submarine from the outside. It got here through magic. Durmstrang is a school that admits only pureblood students, though not all students share this prejudice. The author stated that she thought Durmstrang was in Norway or Sweden along the Arctic Circle, but Pottermore maps place it on the southernmost part of Finland near Russia, right above Lake Ladoga. Beauxbatons is a French school located in the Pyrenees Mountains of southern France. Nicholas Flamel attended Beauxbatons. In the book, there are male Beauxbaton students that are mentioned who come with this group to Hogwarts, but here in the film, it's depicted as an all-female academy. The Beauxbatons carriage is pulled by Abraxans, creating one of my favorite memes. You'll notice the Durmstrang ship has a double-headed eagle on the sails. The Beauxbaton school logo is 2 crossed golden wands shooting out stars. And we should note that Michael Gambon as Dumbledore in this movie does mispronounce Beauxbatons. He says Beauxbatons. It's actually Beauxbatons. But Dumbledore welcomes the new students, and Argus Filch runs in like a big old weirdo, holding his leg. It's one of many odd, unexplained moments where these amazing adult cast members, David Bradley in this case, are really just given unusual physical bits to give them these standout moments in this otherwise very overstuffed movie. Other examples include Snape shoving Ron and Harry's heads, or Hagrid stabbing Flitwick's hand when Flitwick moves a food dish. Dumbledore introduces the women of Beauxbatons and their headmistress, Madame Maxime, and Seamus Finnegan is interested.
Blimey, that's one big woman.
Seamus, we see you're a freak and we don't judge ya. Next are the boys from Durmstrang, led by headmaster Igor Karkaroff, and they breakdance. That's fun. A deleted scene would have shown the Hogwarts kids singing the Hogwarts school song.
Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy Woggy Hogwarts, teach us something, please.
Next, we get a menacing intro shot of Mad Eye Moody, who marches up to Hogwarts in the thunderstorm. The wide set gait actually is similar to the pose David Tennant has been taking as Barty Jr. At the table, Karkaroff and Snape share a look. They were both Death Eaters in the past, so they're just kind of like feeling each other out in this moment. The Durmstrang students sit with the Slytherin kids because, of course, they're also bad boys and into the dark arts with a former Death Eater for a headmaster, and they're all pure-blooded. The Beauxbatons kids sit with the Ravenclaws, I suppose, because like they're the cleanest. Maybe they're just like, blue, cool. Barty Crouch Sr. is introduced, and Alistair Mad Eye Moody leans in, eyeing him, and then jumps at the simulated lightning storm and curses the ceiling. He eyes Barty Sr. because this is actually Barty's son, Barty Jr. in disguise using the Polyjuice potion. So going forward, we will refer to this character as Fake Moody. Moody and Fake Moody are played by Brendan Gleeson, who said he played the character as, quote, a gunslinger with a wand. Fake Moody has to drink Polyjuice potion consistently to keep up his disguise, and Gleeson gives him a bit of a twitch before he drinks, and then shows the immediate effect of the potion as it affects his nerve endings. The real Mad Eye Moody is super paranoid, the result of him hunting dark wizards for years as an Auror and having made a lot of enemies in the process, so he really does drink everything out of a flask to avoid being poisoned. Seamus asks,
What's that he's drinking, do you suppose?
it's not rum, Seamus, take it easy. Now, real Moody's scarred appearance is a result of his days as an Auror, and there have been a lot of fan theories over the years about his magical eye. It's established that this eye can see through Harry's invisibility cloak, and given that the cloak is one of the deathly freaking hallows cut from Death's own cloak, that means Moody's eye must be super powerful. Some believe it's another one of the deathly hallows, but there's nothing in particular pointing to that other than just its comparative power to Harry's invisibility cloak. Dumbledore reveals the Goblet of Fire, which, due to recent events, only students 17 and over can put their names in, and 3 worthy school champions will be selected. Now, if Barty Crouch Sr. seems monotonous in his announcement of this age rule, in the book it is explained he is under the Imperious Curse during this time. We see Fleur Delacour, Clemence Poissy, and her sister Gabrielle next to Cho Chang and Ravenclaw Quidditch captain Roger Davies, who will be Fleur's date to the Yule Ball later. After the scene is a suspicious shot of Karkaroff sneaking over to the Goblet of Fire at night. It's a somewhat clumsy attempt to set up Karkaroff as a red herring suspect, as it's never really revealed later why he snuck in there, but it's assumed that he just fixed it so that it would select his favorite Durmstrang student, Victor Crumb, and not one of the others, you know, like the breakdancing fire breather. Next is the one class the Hogwarts students actually attend in this movie, Defense Against the Dark Arts, with Professor Fake Moody. He explains the Unforgivable Curses.
And they are so named?
Because they are unforgivable.
Haha, yes, the first instance of the Emma Watson Hermione Frey, as Ariana Grande called it in her amazing impression.
You do your Hermione impression? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Ron's been spleached. That.
Been spleached?
Harry, Ron's been spleached.
Perfect. Oh my god, yeah, there is something in the nose.
Ron.
There is. What is that?
No, you can't. I love the vocal fray
It's
so much.
good.
Yeah.
The vocal what?
The vocal fray.
The fray. Oh my god. This
I
is
love
so
it
true.
so much.
Yeah.
Fake Moody uses his eye to look through the back of his head at Seamus Finnegan sticking gum under the desk, and then he throws his chalk at him, hitting the poor Ravenclaw girl behind Seamus. Fake Moody has Ron tell us about the first Unforgivable Curse.
The Imperious Curse?
Oh, yeah, your father would know all about that. Gave the ministry quite a bit of grief a few years ago.
Fake Moody / Barty Jr. is referring to the Ministry of Magic trying to prosecute former Death Eaters like Lucius Malfoy and McNair, who claimed that they were under the Imperious Curse when they were doing Voldemort's bidding. Barty Jr. is a proud Voldemort supporter who did his time in Azkaban. He would particularly hate cowards like Lucius. Fake Moody enlarges this tailless whip scorpion to demonstrate these curses, first using Imperio to compel the scorpion to comedically jump around the room. And, you know, these students think that they're in another Boggart type of Defense Against the dark arts class, where it's going to be another year of laughing until fake Moody scares the life out of all of them, threatening to make this poor bug throw itself out the window or drown itself. Next, fake Moody addresses Neville Longbottom.
Professor Sprout tells me you have an aptitude for herbology.
Yes, setting up Neville for getting the gillyweed later. Neville mentions the Cruciatus curse, which is used to torture. Of course, Neville knows all about this one because, you know, his parents were tortured to the point of insanity. And the torturers there were Barty Crouch Jr. and Bellatrix Lestrange, Rodolphus Lestrange, and Rabaston Lestrange. Fake Moody uses the curse.
Crucio!
Stop it! Can't you see it's bothering him? Stop it!
I love this detail because fake Moody does not care that he's bothering the Scorpion. In fact, he seems to be enjoying it because he's really recreating what he did to the Longbottoms now in front of their son. But Hermione's really saying that it's bothering Neville, and fake Moody's eye looks up and he realizes how Neville's reacting and catches himself being way too obvious in front of the entire class, and that's what leads him to stop. Hermione refuses to say the final curse, probably because she's afraid to actually just say the words, but fake Moody steps in.
Avada Kedavra!
I love how Brendan Gleeson pronounces each curse with a heft and a snarl to indicate how young wizards would not be able to perform these spells just by accident or when they start throwing a tantrum. It requires a certain level of maturity and life experience and intent and just raw rage to perform them. Now, the author actually derived the words Avada Kedavra, the killing curse phrase, from an Aramaic origin of the common magic phrase abracadabra, which translates to let the thing be destroyed. But originally, it was not used for like damage. It was used to describe a curing of illnesses, the sickness being the thing to be destroyed. The word cadavra bears similarity to the English cadaver, which means corpse, deriving from the Latin cadare, to fall. While Harry bears a visible scar representing what happened to him and his parents, Neville's scars are unseen. He mourns looking at the stained glass art of a weeping woman from the rain outside. Fake Moody brings Neville back. In the book, it's to give him the book on herbology, magical water plants of the Highland Lochs, under the guise of trying to cheer him up. Neville can be seen reading this book when the candidates put their names in the goblets later. And we see the candidates do so. Cedric Diggory, Pattinson earning every cent of that wet bump pay because he is dripping visibly here. Fred and George use a charm to try to break Dumbledore's age line, but it does not work and they are given Dumbledore-esque silver hair and beards. Hermione, meanwhile, is reading a book about the Triwizard Tournament because of course she is. Victor Crumb gives her a little look right after he puts his name in because dude likes a brainy girl and ain't afraid of a little mud in his blood. The goblet flame burns from blue to red as it spits out the names of the 3 school champions. From Durmstrang, Victor Crumb. From Beauxbatons, Fleur Delacour, and from Hogwarts, Cedric Diggory. But then a 4th one, Dumbledore catches it and calls out Harry's name, softly at first, then an angry shout.
Harry Potter!
Yes, Michael Gambon is warming up that rage-filled take on Dumbledore in this section.
Everything goes back to the Wizard of Oz, right? New Rockstars puts out these videos that have me up here
Like Oz, the Great and Powerful.
But when you peek behind the curtain, New Rockstars is a whole team of nerds pulling levers to make me shoot fire from my eyes and have my voice
Boom out dramatically and...
I don't know, make SpongeBob memes pop up probably. The levers we and most YouTube professionals pull are all part of Adobe Creative Cloud. We use Premiere to put our videos together, Photoshop to make our thumbnails, and Illustrator to create our merch. You probably already knew how much professionals rely on Adobe Creative Cloud, but it's so accessible, so intuitive, and so easy to use that it's the perfect software suite for creatives at any level to get exactly what's in your brain out into the world, looking, sounding, and feeling exactly the way you want it to. No matter what you create, you owe it to yourself to have the best tools available to bring your vision to life, and that's what Adobe Creative Cloud is built to do. Click the link in the description below between now and December 8th to take advantage of Adobe's Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals to get started with Creative Cloud for cheaper than ever.
Now, you'll notice that the papers that came out are different for each name. Crumbs is written on a small rectangle of parchment. Fleurs is written on a round blue paper lined with gold. That kind of looks like a little cafe doily. Cedric's looks similar to Crumb's parchment, and Harry's is on lined notebook paper. They normally do not write on this type of paper at Hogwarts. They write on parchment. So Barty Crouch Jr. must have used paper from the Muggle world to make it look like Harry used paper that he had gotten from his Muggle aunt and uncle's home, the Dursleys. Now, the film frames this moment as Harry being beholden to magical protocol, but in the book, the Goblet of Fire is described as having a kind of undefiable death magic that scares Harry and is stepping forward. Ron began this movie feeling like the special one for once, his family getting tickets to the Quidditch World Cup, and so the thought of Harry rigging the Goblet of Fire, not telling him about it, particularly enrages him. Although Ron's loyalty always wins out, this is a story where he starts to become a true a-hole from time to time, and you can sense the author mentally preparing to kill off this character in Deathly Hallows. If not for Rupert Grint's comedic charm, specifically in the third and fourth films, I am convinced that Ron would have been a goner by the seventh installment. Just a reminder of the book series publishing timeline versus the film adaptation timeline. J.K. Rowling published Goblet of Fire in July 2000, so this story was written before any of the films came out. This film adaptation released on November 18th, 2005, after the Order of the Phoenix book published in June 2003, and after the Half-Blood Prince book published in July 2005. So while they were making this film, Warner Brothers and Mike Newell knew the dark places the next two installments after this would go, and this, Goblet of Fire, would be the final film that was released into the world with the performances of Rupert Grint and Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, Ralph Fiennes, Matthew Lewis, and the rest. So as Rowling was spending pretty much all of 2006 writing the Deathly Hallows book and submitting her manuscript in January 2007, there is no doubt that this film's performances inspired her decisions to keep Ron alive, despite his petty tantrums that she had put on the page, and her decision to give Neville such a hero moment in Deathly Hallows, and to make Voldemort so broken and so human in the final book to match Fiennes' innate humanity and his decision not to wear red contacts but just use his natural eyes. In the book, when Harry goes downstairs to join the other three, there is a humorous moment when they ask, "Is something wrong?" Because they assume if a short fourth year was sent down to them, then he must just be like a page to tell them where to go next. It's a great little moment of imposter syndrome that plagues Harry throughout the story. But perhaps the most infamous adaptation choice comes right here, when the text describes Dumbledore this way.
"Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire, Harry?" Dumbledore asked calmly.
Which Michael Gambon delivers this way.
Harry, I protest! Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?
Oh my God. I think we can forgive Michael Gambon. Yes, he seems angry, but really, I think he's just panicked that Harry might be in danger, or maybe under the Imperious Curse, or that his connection with Voldemort might have been activated in some way. Now, the author didn't know it in 2000 when writing the book, which is why Dumbledore was calm. But in 2005, the film producers had a much better idea of the prophecy in book 5 and the Horcruxes in book 6, and the fact that Dumbledore would die at the end of book 6. Like, that's how Gambon was playing this. He knew that his character had been deliberately putting Harry Potter in harm's way, knowing that he would be the only key to defeating Voldemort for good. Even Snape in this movie suggesting to let them unfold later really comes under new context in Deathly Hallows, when a flashback reveals that Snape also knew how Dumbledore is exploiting Lily Potter's son. Karkaroff and fake Moody clash.
The Goblet of Fire is an exceptionally powerful magical object. Only an exceptionally powerful Confundus charm could have hoodwinked it.
You seem to have given this a fair bit of thought, Mad-Eye.
It was once my job to think as dark wizards do, Karkaroff. Perhaps you remember.
As we see later, Karkaroff went to Azkaban for being a Death Eater, but he named names to secure his own release, so fake Moody / Barty Crouch absolutely hates him and any other Death Eater who renounced Voldemort, who named names, who bribed people to stay out of Azkaban. This is also why he hates others like Snape and Lucius Malfoy, whose son he later turns into a ferret. Part of the brilliance of fake Moody's plan in this movie is that people around Harry assume that whoever put his name in the goblet is trying to off him during one of the challenges, when in reality, everything really hinges on him making it to the end and being the winner of those challenges. So if fake Moody is helping him out along the way, it looks like he's just trying to keep him safe, as opposed to what he's actually doing, which is delivering him right to that Portkey and right to the Dark Lord. So Harry being forced to serve as a champion turns Ron against him and pisses off the entire Hufflepuff house, because Cedric is like their once-in-a-generation chance at glory, and in book 3, he even bested Harry as a seeker during the Quidditch match. We meet Rita Skeeter as she interviews the champions, played by Miranda Richardson. She uses a quick quotes quill that is prone to editorializing and misquoting.
My eyes aren't glistening with the ghost of my past.
Harry, don't you mean Lily's eyes? And yes, they are. Rita writes the gossip column Me, Myself, and I for the Daily Prophet, which is really part of J.K. Rowling's disgust with the British tabloid press. And actually, the book Goblet of Fire points out that Aunt Petunia subscribes to the Daily Mail. Rita is frequently dressed in green, and there is a plot line in the book that is left out of the film where she turns out to be an unregistered animagus who can turn herself into a green beetle, which she uses to her advantage to spy on people, to get dirt for her articles. Even though she's supposed to be writing a story on all the champions, when the article prints, it's just Harry alone in the photo, with the headline Harry Potter and the Triwizard Cup, one of the original titles for the book. And we also see a bit of the article reads the subheadline, Will he survive? But I love the text layout forming the shape of a trophy. It would make the article pretty hard to read, but it looks cool. There's also a very Simpsons gag here where Miranda Richardson's voice shouts frantically when Harry crumbles the article.
Harry Potter, age 12, suspect entrant in the Triwizard Tournament, his eyes swimming with the ghosts of his past. I chuck you back tears.
After correcting her twice that he's 14, not 12, she still wrote 12, and she took the phrase glistening with the ghosts of his past and changed it to swimming with the ghosts of his past. We also see in this movie how the Hogwarts castle is expanded to include the owlry, where all the owls roost in between delivering mail, and it is covered in shit, making it the perfectly awkward spot for Harry to ask out Cho later. Goblet of Fire as a movie is really owl obsessed.
Well, you can tell Ronald.
I'm not an owl!
We learn that Harry has been corresponding with Sirius Black, who meets him from the Gryffindor fireplace. Now in the book, Sirius does this via flu powder, but this film renders Gary Oldman's face into the coals, which I suppose looks pretty cool, but it's not the flu powder magic from the book or from movie 2. In the Order of the Phoenix film, they try to cast it closer to the green flu powder from the book. When Ron interrupts them, his pajamas that he's wearing are slightly too small for him. This is a nice little detail because again, everything he has is either hand-me-down or just something that they can't afford to replace. When Hagrid shows Harry the dragons, Hagrid has spruced himself up for Madame Maxime, trying to tame his crazy hair using axle grease. Ron's second oldest brother, Charlie, is one of the dragon handlers since his job was working with the dragons in Romania, though we don't see Charlie in this movie and we don't really even see the dragons in the scene. We just see their, flames from out their cages. Harry goes to talk to Cedric, passing Hufflepuffs wearing pins that say Cedric Diggory before twisting into Potter stinks. In the book, these buttons started at Slytherin but spread to Hufflepuff, and now here it's the towering Ernie Macmillan, the towhead who was talking major shit about Harry in the Chamber of Secrets film. When Harry approaches Cedric, this is so weird. He's kind of goofing around with his buddies, and it looks like they're leaning over him to kiss him. And I was so confused what they're doing here. But really, the reason Harry goes up to him is that in the book, Harry feels bad that Cedric would be the last to know about the dragons, and he gets a moment alone with Cedric by using a spell to cut open his book bag in the corridor. Here, though, I think these Hufflepuffs might be making fun of Harry Potter by restaging the Dementor's kiss that would have caused Harry to faint during the Prisoner of Azkaban Quidditch match that, in the book, Hufflepuff wins when Cedric catches a snitch. And Cedric, after that match, felt bad and offered a forfeit. In the Prisoner of Azkaban movie, Cedric, played by a different actor, just gets electrocuted and both teams forfeit. Now, if you listen closely after this, you can hear Seamus talking to Ron.
It's not like I tried to blow things up exactly. This happens a fair bit. You have to admit though, fire is pretty fascinating.
I love that we finally get an acknowledgement of Seamus's penchant for blowing shit up. But of course, Seamus's pyromania comes in handy in Deathly Hallows Part 2 when they blow up the footbridge. Fake Moody transfigures Malfoy into a ferret, somewhat ironically the same thing hippogriffs like Buckbeak love to eat when they're not stomping Malfoys. Fake Moody snarls,
I teach you to curse someone when their back is turned.
While Barty Crouch Jr. hates the Malfoys for their fakeness, he shares the Dark Lord's pride in dueling enemies face to face.
Don't you turn your back on me, Harry Potter! I want you to look at me when I kill you!
Moody takes Harry into his classroom. Now, Fake Moody has decorated the room with various discs of faux glass, which shows the owner when enemies are near. There's also a sneakoscope in his room which whistles and spins when someone nearby is doing something untrustworthy. In the Prisoner of Azkaban book, Ron got a sneakoscope in Egypt and it was always going off because Scabbers was usually around him. But when Fake Moody looks into the faux glass, on the left, I'm pretty sure that's a reflection of Barty Crouch Sr. While at first we see this as a red herring that we might have reason to suspect Barty Sr., it makes the most sense that Barty Jr.'s main enemy would be his father. In the book, the reflections in the faux glass are revealed in the later scene when they force Veritaserum on him to be Dumbledore, Snape, and McGonagall. So we're on to the first task. Fred and George are taking bets, with Cedric shown as a favorite to win with 7-4 odds, and Harry here is a long shot at 30-1. In the book, Fred and George wanted to start a business selling magical joke items, and they placed a bet on the Quidditch World Cup with Ludo Bagman, a ministry official. When the twins win big, Bagman welshes on the bet, and they spend the rest of the school year trying to get him to pay up. An earlier draft of the script reportedly had left all of this in, but it was ultimately cut out. Hermione had spent time teaching Harry to perfect the Accio spell so that he could retrieve his broom for the task. In the book, the dragons are all nesting mothers and the gold eggs are mixed in with real eggs, so they are motivated to fiercely protect them. Filch setting off the cannon too early is a running gag throughout the films. He does it again later when the competitors enter the maze. The art department built the dragons practically and provided art, and then the practical model was scanned into the computer to digitally create the creatures. The effects department also built a large mechanical dragon with a flamethrower in it so that the actors would have something to react to. There's actually a fun Easter egg at the end of the credits of this film that say, "No dragons were harmed in the making of this movie." Now the book goes into what the other champions do in this task. Cedric transforms a rock into a dog to distract the Swedish short snout, but it changes its mind and goes after him. Victor Crumb shoots a spell into the Chinese fireball's eye, but it stomps in pain and crushes some of the real eggs, which ends up being a penalty. Fleur Delacour made the Welsh Green fall asleep, but actually had to cast a water spell to extinguish the fire on her clothes when the dragon snored flames. But Harry evades the Hungarian Horntail by summoning his broom using Accio Pinocchio. As we discussed in the Prisoner of Azkaban breakdown, Harry always feels more comfortable in the air than he does grounded. He uses a foot bridge to clothesline the dragon, and we get this great shot of Harry zooming into the golden egg with his hand reflecting on the metal so that it's essentially a golden snitch for a seeker to snag. In the book, as soon as Harry gets on his broom, he just kind of like translates the entire challenge into a match of Quidditch. In the Great Hall, we see Padma and Parvati saying hi to Harry. The twins are both shown to be in Gryffindor in this movie, even though Padma in the books is sorted into Ravenclaw. Hermione reads the Daily Prophet, and there's a headline that reads, "Ministry Witch still missing, Minister of Magic now personally involved." That's a reference to Bertha Jorkins, whom we talked about before in the subplot that was removed from the film. But when Hermione ruffles a page, the other side includes headlines, "Confused Muggle Train Spotters and Hogwarts Express," and "Ginger Witch still under some kind of pressure." The Ginger Witch was a creation by Eduardo Lima, part of the Mina Lima designer team, who did all the print designs for the Daily Prophet and the Marauders map. She shows up mentioned in a headline in Order of the Phoenix, involved in a henna explosion, and in Half-Blood Prince, she's finally arrested, according to the Quibbler. Lima named her the Ginger Witch after Debbie, a red-haired prop buyer for the film's productions. And you'll notice behind them in the scene is a rack of floating pastries, similar to the floating baked good magic that Dobby used in Chamber of Secrets, as this food was prepared by the house elves working in the Hogwarts kitchens. In the book, Dobby returns here, working in the kitchens at Hogwarts after being freed from Lucius Malfoy's service. Dumbledore does pay him, but normally house elves do labor for free, and most of them are depicted as liking it that way. So that's why Hermione starts SPEW, Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, because she sees them as slaves in the wizarding world. And she's not wrong, but the whole storyline is just kind of so they end up avoiding it in the films. But in the book, it's actually Dobby who gives Harry the gillyweed, which again Dobby stole from Snape's office in the book after fake Moody lets him overhear a conversation between him and McGonagall. There's another elf named Winky in the book who worked for years for Barty Crouch Sr. but was let go at the Quidditch World Cup. Dumbledore also lets her work in Hogwarts, but the shame of being a free elf drives her to alcoholism. Right? McGonagall teaches the Gryffindor students to ballroom dance, saying that within every girl is a swan slumbering, longing to burst forth and take flight, and f***ing Ron says this.
Something's about to burst out of Eloise Midgen, but I don't think it's a swan.
Poor Eloise Midgen. In the Goblet of Fire book, on page 394, actually, Eloise Midgen comes up as a girl with acne, whom Ron doesn't want to end up having to go to the ball with. So when he's talking about something bursting out, he's talking about her pimples. And she looks so stressed out. I feel so bad for Eloise. Justice for Eloise. And Ron, we know how you're going to end up looking, my man. Harry tries to approach Cho to ask her out, but the gang of Ravenclaw Yellow Jackets puts up a fierce protego. It's because these smart, supportive Ravenclaw ladies love and support each other and don't want any of their friends going home with either of these two assholes who made Eloise Midgen cry. Hagrid tells Maxime that his father was a normal sized and that he was able to lift his father when he was a teenager. So yeah, it's interesting, but Hagrid's dad totally banged a giantess. And that would not only be like impractical, but also giants are considered lesser intelligent species. And some in the fandom have questioned whether Hagrid's mother would have even been able to consent. We're not gonna go into that. Fred asks Angelina Johnson to be his date. She is the chaser on the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and Fred is a beater, so they do know each other. And actually in the Goblet of Fire book, Angelina puts her name in the cup since her 17th birthday was the week before, and Fred actually wants her to be Hogwarts champion. Snape smacks Ron with a book during the scene, and what is this? Is this a study hall? Because all years and all houses are present? Again, not enough actual classes are shown in this school movie. And I like how you see a flame flaring up in the background, which I assume is one of Seamus's explosions. Harry finally runs into Cho in the owlry, but she's already going with Cedric. Ron asks Fleur Delacour on an impulse and is left stunned. The book actually details how Fleur is part Vila, so Ron truly would not have been able to control this. Harry and Ron end up going with the Patil twins. Ron frets over his dress robes.
What are those? My dress robes.
What are those? For a moment, Harry thinks Ron doesn't know what a toothbrush is, because that's what Harry's holding, which is both a dig at the dental care in the UK and the fact that wizards don't know what dentists are. Hermione arrives.
She looks beautiful.
Yeah, she does.
Did Harry really think that Parvati would be cool with him drooling over Cho right in front of her? Emma Watson actually ate it on the staircase on one of the first takes. In the book, Hermione uses a hair serum called Sleek Easy's hair potion that, fun fact, was invented by one of Harry's ancestors. So that, along with the Skelegro, is why the Potter family is so loaded. Everyone dances at the ball. The sound mixers actually added a loud purr to Ms. Norris when Filch dances with her. We see fake Moody's outfit incorporating a dead ferret attached to his belt, which makes the earlier scene of him turning Malfoy into a ferret way more disturbing. Now the band is the Weird Sisters, and they're playing Do the Hippogriff. Even though they're called the Weird Sisters in the books as a reference to Shakespeare's witches and Macbeth, they actually could not call them the Weird Sisters in any of the films because I guess there was some kind of like potential legal issue with a band called the Weird Sisters in the real world. But the musicians of this band are all cameos by famous rock musicians. You see Jarvis Cocker of Pulp playing Myron Wagtail, the lead singer. Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead plays Curly Duke, the lead guitarist. Jason Buckle from All Seeing Eye plays Heathcote Barbary, the rhythm guitarist. Steve Mackey, also from Pulp, plays Donegan Tremlett, the bassist. Steve Clayton, a musician known from Add N to X, plays Gideon Crumb, the keyboardist and bagpiper. And Phil Selway, also from Radiohead, plays Orsino Thruston, the drummer. Ron is jealous of Victor Crumb and calls Crumb a ruddy pumpkin head because Ron sucks. And Harry responds, I don't think it was the books that had him going into the library, even though the Patil sisters exchanged a look on that one, realizing that both of them drew the short straw with these duds, and not even the fun kind of dud from the Simpsons board game.
You got the dud!
Hey! He looks just like you, Poindexter!
In the book, Hermione had complained that Crumb would show up at the library every day when she was there studying, and his noisy fangirls would follow him. He later admitted that he just went to see Hermione. Ron stupidly leaves Hermione crying on the stairs, and I like how behind her is some other girl crying, because at every high school dance, there's always like a crying stoop. And I love the shot of the dance floor as it starts to empty out, and we see Neville and Ginny and Hagrid and Maxime, and if you look at the background, Fred and Angelina are still twirling around, and I love that, except you do have to remember that these two do go on to date in the future. And when Fred dies in Deathly Hallows, Angelina ends up marrying his twin brother George, and they have a kid that they named Fred. At Cedric's suggestion, Harry takes his egg to the prefect's bathroom, and Harry opens the egg again, releasing the deafening scream, but you can see bubble shapes in the glow inside, a clue that they would need to open it underwater. He runs into Moaning Myrtle, who says,
I was circling a blocked drain the other day and could swear I saw a bit of Polyjuice potion.
This is one of two mentions of Polyjuice as a clue for the fake Moody twist, along with the ingredients being stolen from Snape's office later. Despite Shirley Henderson being 40 when this movie came out and Daniel Radcliffe being 16, Mike Newell really plays up Myrtle trying to peer through the soap suds. Yuck. Moody tells Neville to help Harry take his books back, setting up Neville to tell Harry about Gillyweed, and that brings us to the second task. Producer David Heyman said that the biggest challenge in terms of filming was the second task because it took place underwater and involved one of the largest underwater sets ever constructed for a film, a water tank with a blue screen backdrop, and the tank held 500,000 gallons of water. Radcliffe trained for 6 months to learn how to dive and how to hold his breath underwater because he was actually underwater for all of this, and because he was a minor, and because Hollywood learned a lot of lessons from the tortuous experience of the cast on James Cameron's The Abyss. No shot lasted longer than 11 seconds. The on-set safety divers developed a distress signal for Daniel Radcliffe to indicate he was out of air and needed to be brought up to the surface immediately, but that signal was a thumbs up. So after one take, Radcliffe forgot and gave a thumbs up, meaning all is good, and the safety team freaked out and rushed him to the surface, and Radcliffe, poor guy, ended up getting 2 ear infections. So a ton of creatures live in the Hogwarts Black Lake. In addition to the mer people, there's a giant squid and selkies and grindylows, which are the creatures that take out Fleur in this sequence. Fleur and Cedric use a bubblehead charm, allowing them to breathe underwater, and Crumb transfigures himself into a shark, but the spell goes wrong, so he's like just shark on the top half. Just like in the book, Harry arrives first to the hostages, and he wants to rescue all of them. The full riddle of the egg was this: come seek us where our voices sound, we cannot sing above the ground, and while you're searching, ponder this: we've taken what you'll sorely miss, an hour long you'll have to look, and to recover what we took, but past an hour the prospect's black, too late it's gone, it won't come back. So the movie leaves out that last part, but in the book, Harry takes that last part dead serious, without realizing that they weren't really going to let people die at the bottom of a lake. But Harry's naivete gives him extra points at the end of this. He rescues Ron and Fleur's sister, and when they surface, young Nigel beams up at Malfoy, and Malfoy swats his hat in anger. We see this in wide initially, so that when Malfoy does it again in the medium shot to button the scene, it feels excessive. Like, leave his hat alone, my man. Barty Sr. recognizes fake Moody's tongue flick. Fake Moody takes a big swig of Polyjuice potion to even himself out. Barty Jr. has walked up on this chat just as Barty Sr. tells Harry how he's sure his parents would be proud of him and how hard it is to lose family, but Barty Crouch Sr. shows up in the next scene, abruptly killed off. So that, plus fake Moody calling Barty Sr. mad, is this movie's way of trying to stay very true to the book sequence where Harry and Victor run into a seemingly insane Barty Sr. in the Dark Forest when he's referring to a tree as his assistant, Mr. Weathersby. But we later find out that Barty Sr. was really just fighting off the Imperious Curse that Voldemort and Wormtail had him under. And that explains all of his odd behavior, like his lack of reaction to Harry's name coming out of the Goblet of Fire. All of that is jettisoned for this film. And we get more context as we go into the Pensieve sequence, in which Harry looks into Dumbledore's memory of the day of Igor Karkaroff's trial, overseen by Barty Crouch Sr. Now, it's a separate Pensieve memory, but in the book, we also see Barty Sr. personally presiding over Barty Jr.'s trial and sending his teenage son to Azkaban. But the version of the Pensieve flashback we do see serves mostly to connect the dots with Barty Crouch Jr. Karkaroff named several Death Eaters, even Rosier, who was part of Snape's friend group when they were students and who Moody killed when they were trying to apprehend him, as well as Augustus Rookwood, who worked in the Department of Mysteries. After Karkaroff outs Rookwood, he's taken to Azkaban, but he escapes in Order of the Phoenix and rejoins Voldemort's numbers. Karkaroff also names Severus Snape, who Dumbledore vouches for immediately because Snape was a Death Eater who flipped and became a spy for the Order of the Phoenix at great personal risk. And Deathly Hallows, we see more of that backstory. But then finally, Karkaroff drops the big name, Barty Crouch Jr. Now, Barty Crouch Jr. again is tried in a different Pensieve memory in the book, but the film version of the scene condenses all the memories into one. And it all comes off as a bit rushed and kind of silly because Barty Jr. did not have to affirm the Death Eater accusation right there. And yes, David Tennant flicks his tongue to establish a physical link to fake Moody. Also, this is not clear in the film, but in the book, the reason J.K. Rowling gave father and son the same name, Barty Crouch, was to logically justify Harry seeing Barty Crouch on the Marauders map, walking around Hogwarts, thinking it's Barty Sr. just being suspicious, when really it's Barty Jr. in disguise as Moody. And when Harry tells Moody about this, fake Moody confiscates the map and uses it to get to Harry, just as Lupin warned Harry an enemy of his would do if the map ever got in the wrong hands. But because the Marauders map scene is left out of the movie, the name issue just kind of feels like an unnecessary redundancy that makes this a little extra confusing. As Dumbledore stands by this glass encasement, it contains a pyramid with a ball hanging from a pendulum, which many online have said forms a symbol of the Deathly Hallows. But I don't know, folks. For this to have been intentional, Rowling would have had to have known about that symbol a long time before she started writing Deathly Hallows, and for her to have told the filmmakers and the set decorators about it. But it does make a visually interesting coincidence. Harry overhears Snape and Karkaroff arguing about their dark marks, established to cast suspicion on them both, but really they're just worried about Voldemort's return because the marks are getting more clear. Snape accuses Harry of stealing gillyweed from his supply closet, as well as the ingredients of Polyjuice Potion. Again, in the book, it's Dobby who steals the gillyweed, but here it suggested Neville took it, which that's kind of fun to imagine. On to the third task. Flitwick has the Hogwarts band constantly on the clock in this movie. Like, you know that kid is just tired of going like, dun, 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 dun. But it's most effective in this sequence, tragically, as we'll see later. We see the Beauxbatons students doing the Macarena. Maybe Los Del Rio were wizards and we never knew about it. Now, the maze is built on what's normally the Quidditch field, but we never see a normal Hogwarts Quidditch match in this film. Dumbledore says,
"You'll find no dragons or creatures of the deep. Instead, you'll face something even more challenging. But be very wary. You could just lose yourselves along the way."
So the maze in the book was filled with magical creatures, including a sphinx whose riddle the contestants had to correctly answer to move forward. But Mike Newell said that he wanted to make the maze more psychological and give it a life of its own. And he described the maze saying, "It's like it reduces you to your animal components and you become savage and wild and uncivilized." Nah, you just blew all your budget on the CGI dragons in the water tank and you didn't want to upstage the graveyard. I get it. But moving hedges and scary wind, what makes a maze interesting are the firm but confusing turns of the path itself. Like, that alone is what gets in your head when you're going through a maze. So if the hedges that form that maze path just smush together to erase the path, you're not in a maze anymore. You're just in a bush. What's the point of it even being a maze? Like, storytellers as far back as the Greeks with the island of Crete and the labyrinth on it understood that mazes need a monster in them to represent the demon of our subconscious. On Crete, it was a Minotaur. In The Shining, it was Jack Torrance. This maze is just like the first time we saw a highly anticipated sequence from the book that, when it was adapted to screen, just landed with a big fart. Fake Moody has placed Victor under the Imperious Curse so that he attacks Fleur just to clear Harry's path. Harry sends up red sparks to mark Fleur's location. Periculum was the spell incantation used for the flare effect in this movie, but it was later clarified that Vermilius would be the proper spell here. Cedric uses Expelliarmus on Victor, but it doesn't actually disarm Victor of his wand. Like, afterwards, Cedric has to go there and kick it out of his hand and really just kind of knocks him out. The movies often use Expelliarmus as more more of a concussive spell, which, it's okay that it concusses you, but it should at least also knock the wand out of your hand in the process. Harry nobly saves Cedric from the roots and decides that they should both grab the cup at the same time, which in retrospect is what drags Cedric into the situation where he is the spare who gets unceremoniously killed. Ugh. The cup, it turns out, is a Portkey, and it takes them back to the little Hangleton graveyard. Wormtail returns carrying baby Voldermort, who says what my wife and I would often puppet our baby son to say when we got bored.
Kill the spare!
Avada Kedavra!
Kill the spare. Avada Kedavra. Kill the spare? It's such a cruel dehumanization of all the promise that Amos Diggory's son and the pride of Hufflepuff offered the world. It's a chilling line in the book that this moment in the film kind of brushes past far too quickly. And really, I think it's just because they didn't want to focus on these words coming from a bebe version of Voldemort and have us asking too many questions about why he's a bebe. Wormtail dumps bebe Voldemort into the cauldron, and we get some truly creepy dark magic. Bone of the father unwillingly given, flesh of the servant willingly sacrificed, blood of the enemy forcibly taken. The reason all this feels so cruel is that in every other instance of the series, Harry's suffering at the climax is a result of, you could say, his own youthful mistakes. Like, he suspects Snape, not Quirrell, in Philosopher's Stone. In Chamber of Secrets, he gives in to Tom Riddle's diary. In Prisoner of Azkaban, he's too hung up on his father to trust himself to repel the Dementors. And then after this, in Order of the Phoenix, he's really too eager to draw conclusions from his own visions that he falls right into Voldemort's trap. And then in Half-Blood Prince, he hates Malfoy too much to see why his rival is suffering until it's too late. But here, at the midpoint of the series, Harry really did nothing wrong. In fact, he only did the right thing. He truly was a victim of the failures of those around him to protect him. Sometimes bad things just happen. Sometimes evil will find a way. Voldemort bubbles out of the cauldron. To complete this look, Ray Fiennes shaved his head and they used prosthetics to eliminate his eyebrows, but he didn't want too much on his face because he wanted to be more free to emote, but that's also why they did away with Voldemort's red eyes from the book. Fiennes wanted people to be able to see the expression in his real eyes, but Heyman didn't want his face to just be a normal human face, so they digitally flattened and then eliminated the nose and created slits so that he would be somewhat snake-like. Actually, when we first see his head, his neck and his jowls are inhumanly thin and snake-like, as this is like a CGI head, but then they use Fiennes' hand as an in-shot transition so that on the other side of the hand, it's now Fiennes' practical head and makeup. When approaching the character, Fiennes started with the idea of love is repulsive to Voldemort. He can't help thinking he's been cheated of it, and so it's something to be despised and destroyed. He added that Mike Newell was keen to explore Voldemort's unexpected mood swings, calm and smooth in one moment and violently lashing out in the next. Voldemort regains his wand and uses it to touch the dark mark, and within seconds, his inner circle of Death Eaters apparates in. Voldemort says,
Not one of you tried to find me. Crab!
Yes, that is Crabbe and Goyle's papas, plus McNair, the headsman who nearly executed Buckbeak in Prisoner of Azkaban. Now, Voldemort just kind of face pushes him here, but in the book, he straight up Crucios Avery. The silver hand that Voldemort creates for Wormtail actually eventually causes Wormtail's death. Because Harry spared his life at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban, Wormtail will later pause when he's supposed to kill him, and that moment's hesitation causes his own hand to turn on him and strangle him to death, because Voldemort created the hand with a bit of loyalty to Voldemort, not to Wormtail. Voldemort explains what happened with Lily and baby Harry.
She provided the ultimate protection. I could not touch him. It was old magic.
So the old magic that he refers to is the fact that Voldemort gave Lily the option to step aside and spare her own life, but she chose to devote her dying breaths in protection of her son. And that love is what protected Harry, what caused the spell to rebound, protection that lives on through Lily's surviving sister, Petunia, and what we will later learn turned Harry into a Horcrux himself. Voldemort calls this old magic, something he should have foreseen. And we come back to the Aramaic translation for abracadabra, and thus Avada Kedavra, which is let the thing be destroyed. But in the context of an illness or a malady that a healer was trying to expunge. All magic, they're implying here, at its root was not meant to be used for killing, but used for healing. It was meant to be a spectrum of ways to show each other love. Voldemort proves that since Harry's blood was used to resurrect him, he can physically touch Harry again, and Voldemort relishes this, sticking his tongue out. And I love this detail. We see that his tongue is freaking forked like a snake. Very cool. That also explains why he kind of has a little weird way of talking. Voldemort uses all three unforgivable curses on Harry during their confrontation in the sequence. He makes him bow using an unspoken Imperio. He tortures him with the Cruciatus curse. And then tries to to hit him with the killing curse, Harry meets him with Expelliarmus, face to face. Now, while Voldemort's kill should be instant, because his wand and Harry's wand share a core, the tail feather from Fox the Phoenix, it creates an effect known as Priori Incantatem. This is a charm that forces a wand to reveal an echo of the last spell it had performed. In this case, Voldemort's killing of Cedric Diggory and Frank the Groundskeeper and Lily and James Potter. In the book, Bertha Jorkins is also there, and she also cheers Harry on along with Frank. It's very, very sweet and wholesome. But the idea is these are not ghosts. They're echoes of light that can blind you, but are not like the actual souls or the ghosts of the people. The book also describes what Harry hears during this charm to be the Phoenix Song. Patrick Doyle scores it with this heroic song.
Harry, when the connection is broken, you must get to the Portkey.
Doyle sounds like he's sampling John Williams, but not like Harry Potter John Williams. It kind of sounds like Star Wars John Williams, because this is basically the Force theme during the trench run, and when Obi-Wan's ghost is saying, use the Force. Cedric asks Harry to take his body back. Harry breaks the connection, Voldemort is blinded by the light, and Harry runs back to Cedric's body to pull off an instant Accio, and he is out of there. Now, the author confirmed in an interview with Entertainment Weekly's amazing Jeff Jensen, back when the book came out, that Harry saving Cedric's body was inspired by the Hector, Patroclus, Achilles love triangle in the Iliad. Now, I've seen this interview quote mentioned in dozens of places online, and I don't think anyone really dug into what Jensen and Rowling were actually talking about in that interview. Achilles and Patroclus, some scholars have interpreted, have an implied homosexual relationship. In the Trojan War, when Hector kills Patroclus, Achilles falls into a state of grief that is described in a particular way by Homer to be the type of grief one would feel for their spouse. And Achilles requests that when he dies, his bones be mixed in with Patroclus' bones in a vase. So, Jensen and Rowling were really saying that Harry's affection and his grief for Cedric is akin to Achilles' affection and grief for Patroclus. Now, I don't think Rowling was saying that Harry is gay, as really Achilles' sexual orientation is just debated among historians and literary scholars, but I think it's clear that Harry has a platonic love for Cedric. And what Jensen and Rowling were getting at is this kind of love triangle with Cho Chang in the mix as well. Like Cedric takes the role that Harry wishes he had with Cho. And at the end of the day, there is a protective instinct there that Harry inherited from his mother. And that, no matter where or how the love is directed, is still love. When Harry reappears in the arena, the band immediately starts playing. It's a tragically delayed realization, and that poor tuba player just really flattens that last note. As we've been through the darkest hell, that we forget the athletic context that all of this took place within. Those of us in America who would watch college football games and watch kids get gravely injured on the field know how horrifying this is, and have heard the marching band just suddenly go dead silent. Fleur, who knew that something evil was happening in the maze of this final challenge, was dreading a corpse to appear, and it is her scream of agony that stops the celebration. Minister Fudge wants the body to be removed, but Amos Diggory cuts through.
That's my son! This is my boy!
It is absolutely heartbreaking. Just moments earlier, he had been giving Cedric some bits of fatherly wisdom before he went into the maze. Fake Moody drags Harry away from the scene. You'll notice behind them in the tunnel are Fred and George, so presumably it was they who alerted Dumbledore that Moody was acting sus. Harry knows when Moody refers to Voldemort as the Dark Lord, and obviously when Moody brings up the graveyard, despite Harry never mentioning any graveyard. Fake Moody is out of Polyjuice Potion and reverts to Barty Jr. There's a shot where part of his face droops to make one eye look like David Tennant's eye. This whole end reveal in the book is much more elaborate and Agatha Christie-esque to fill in the holes of things that they had glossed over or flat out changed in the movie. After Barty Jr. was sent to Azkaban, his mother, Barty Sr.'s wife, became sick with grief. Before she died, she begged Barty Sr. to bring her to the Azkaban prison so that she could switch places with her son. She drank Polyjuice Potion, assumed the identity of Barty Crouch Jr., and died shortly after that, and was buried on the grounds by the Dementors. Now, the Dementors are blind, so all they knew when Barty Sr. came to visit was one healthy and one sick person entered, and one healthy and one sick person left. After that, Barty Sr., with the help of the house elf Winky, kept his son Barty Jr. at his house under the control of the Imperious Curse. Publicly, everyone assumed that Barty Jr. was dead at this point. Bertha Jorkins stopped by the house unannounced and found out the truth, but Barty Sr. altered her memory. That's what led to what happened in Albania when Wormtail and Voldemort found her and broke the memory charm on Bertha and tortured all that information out of her about the Triwizard Tournament and and Moody going to teach at Hogwarts. Then they went to Barty Sr.'s house, put him under the Imperious Curse, freed Barty Jr., and had him switch places with Moody on the night before Moody went to Hogwarts. We also learned that after Barty Sr. struggled out of the Imperious Curse to warn Dumbledore about Voldemort's plot, his son, as fake Moody, killed Barty Sr. and transfigured the body into a bone and buried him in Hagrid's yard, probably dug up by Fang at some point. Dumbledore finds all this out from Barty Jr. via the Veritaserum and from Winky, who has been working in the Hogwarts kitchens and glug, 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 and is now just distraught that her family's secrets are out in the open. Then, before Dumbledore can intervene, a Dementor in the book swoops in and gives Junior the Dementor's kiss, leaving him unable to confirm his whole story to anyone else. And that's why Fudge refuses to believe Dumbledore, also just because Fudge is stubborn and politically motivated. And Fudge says that Harry is nuts, and both privately and publicly denies that Voldemort has returned. Dumbledore urges Fudge to take quick action so that Voldemort doesn't regain his past followers like the Giants and the Dementors, but Fudge refuses. Now, all of that backstory was a lot, and arguably unadaptable for a 2.5-hour film. I think, though, it represents a thematic example of adults in this world all willing to break the rules and commit the unforgivable to help the kids that they are vicariously living through get ahead. And all of those cut corners eventually turn into a gaping loophole for evil to re-enter through. And worst of all, this obvious evil is allowed to grow because its existence is denied an attempt for people to maintain the status quo. But in the film, without that ministry drama and the Crouch family conspiracy connective tissue, even as dense as that is, what's left in this film is really just a story about, I guess, imposter syndrome, teenage romance, bigotry in the wizarding world, and it all just feels a bit disjointed. Dumbledore eulogizes Cedric to the student body, deciding to tell the kids the truth about Voldemort.
Cedric Diggory was murdered by Lord Voldemort.
And this is a big deal because it's the first time many of these kids have heard this name from an authority spoken out loud instead of you-know-who, he who must not be named. Dumbledore knows that the ministry will start putting out misinformation and lies spread faster than the truth. In the book, the only reason Rita Skeeter doesn't publish any conspiracy theories right away is because Hermione discovers that she's an unregistered animagus, using her beetle form to eavesdrop and threatens to expose her. The Durmstrang and the Beauxbatons students leave Hogwarts. Ron gets some love from Fleur, who will go on to marry his oldest brother Bill. In the book, it's Victor who pilots the Durmstrang ship since Karkaroff has fled. We learn in Half-Blood Prince that Voldemort and the Death Eaters hunted Karkaroff down and killed him, so he doesn't last too long after this. The film ends with Hermione saying, almost hopefully,
"Everything's going to change now, isn't it?"
as we crane up to the sky, a mix of dark clouds and hopeful sunlight shining through. More of a mixed tone than the way Rowling ends the fourth book, a Hex confrontation with Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle on the Hogwarts Express, and Harry giving Fred and George his prize money to start their joke shop, because the world needs laughter, and Harry returns with Uncle Vernon, remembering, as Hagrid said, what would come, and he would have to meet it when it did. But really, the most important line that we are left with comes from Dumbledore.
Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy.
In the first three films, doing the right thing was almost inevitable for Harry, the path of least resistance. Now, as we get older, the easier path to take is the low road because it slopes downhill. So for this week's Room of Requirement, season 4 of this HBO series, more than any other season, I think will have the most to benefit from an adaptation from a book to an 8 or 10 episode season as opposed to a 2.5-hour film. So let's break down what this 4th season could look like. 1, we really need the Goblet of Fire season to focus on the failure of well-meaning institutions. Hogwarts and the other schools, the Ministry of Magic, the media, organized sports, and the authority figures who run all of these, in failing the children they claim to protect. That is what sets up the completely dystopian situation with the Ministry and Umbridge and the media in Order of the Phoenix. We need to see how a wholesome tradition of a Junior Olympics gets exploited by several adults, and because they all bend or break the rules, corruption leads to an evil returning and hurting these kids. So this story needs the fully fleshed out conspiracy backstory of Barty Sr. and Barty Jr. and Mrs. Crouch. It needs Bertha Jorkins. It needs Winky. It really is the perfect kind of process story and slow burning systems failing narrative that works great when unfolding over multiple episodes of television. We also need to bring back Ludo Bagman and the Weasley twins' entrepreneurial turn, because it shows how scummy sports bettors also seek to con kids. And Harry is right that the darkening wizarding world needs a couple laughs. We need to make Rita Skeeter her beetle animagus form. Her character is far more effective as a media criticism when she's literally a bug, considering British tabloids have been sued for bugging and hacking phones. Restore the maze to its book accuracy. Give me that Sphinx. And I think we need to cast a younger actor for Barty Crouch Jr. Nothing against David Tennant, he's one of the best, but he's just too old for this part. A younger actor would make that trial hit even harder. Next, we need Dobby and Winky to be in this story, but I don't know if we need SPEW. I don't know. I just don't think there's a good angle for that subplot. I can't think of one. Also, let's change the name Cho Chang, please. I know Rowling was probably aiming for some like Dickensian alliteration, but let's just give Cho a different first name. And the Polyjuice twist with fake Moody to Barty Jr., I think might just be too Scooby-Doo to hinge a full season on. Like, I just wonder what a Goblet of Fire season would look like if we knew from the beginning, or from like the 1/3 mark of the arc of the story, that these kids' teacher was a Death Eater in disguise. But the mystery would be just what his plan is, and we'd be stewed in this great dramatic irony for 8 episodes. The Triwizard Cup being a Portkey is a much cooler twist than the Polyjuice reveal. Dumbledore could just out Barty Jr. while Harry is in the maze, and Barty Jr. could just sit there laughing, okay, you got me, but you're too late. Lastly, on a personal note, I was disappointed to see HBO's statement regarding J.K. Rowling, largely because the network, I think, could have just stayed out of it. I think we are learning that this is truly a wedge issue that certain interests are using to divide us, and I am just going to try to be better being aware of those forces so that I don't end up being a pawn in this game. But I do stand by my original statement about the author, which you can see in our first breakdown of the series. Also, please consider supporting one of the important organizations listed in the description below. Up next in our rewatch series is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Big thanks to Gina Ippolito for helping research and write this breakdown. Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow me at EAVOS. Subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Mischief managed.